This podcast is part of the Game and Entertainment Network. Visit tgenetwork.net to find the latest episodes from all our shows.
It's time for AggroChat, the official podcast of the Tales of the Agronaut blog and stalwart gaming community, where we talk about stuff and things and the stuff about the things, and sometimes gaming. I'm Belgast, and let's start the show. Hey folks, it's that time again. Time for another episode of AggroChat. This is episode 116. And tonight, I'm joined by Ashgar.
Hello.
And Tam.
Hello.
We might
just
have...
going through the list, trying to think of who wasn't here.
Yeah, no, like, it's... We maybe are down a bunch of people, or at least it feels like we're down a bunch of people, because we're down half our people.
It's summer. They go places. It happens.
I know, and at some point I need to, like, train an understudy so that I can take a week off without us just not recording.
Coach done it.
Yeah. Well, no, he's done the MC part, but, like, he hasn't actually done
Right.
the producing the audio part.
That's fair.
So, yeah, not that it's that hard. Like, it's just, yeah, someday I need to train an understudy. So, yeah, this week was patch week across the board in everything.
Yes.
It was.
So, you had big patch in Final Fantasy XIV, big patch in WoW, Starbound released. So, those are some of the things we're going to talk about. So, Deep Dungeon, aka Palace of the Dead. That's pretty damn cool.
I've spent so much time in there.
Has that just been your go-to activity this week?
More or less. Like, I've wanted to level up characters, but leveling up new characters is sort of miserable. And so I found a way to do it.
I'm kind of in that way too, because like I did not want to level my scholar, and I was more than happy to sort of heal while we did Deep Dungeon the other night.
Yeah.
And I do mean sort of heal, because I wasn't really a healer, or at least in no way was I a proper healer. We'll just say that.
I did kind of really want to go in there as more for of something, because 3 black mages was kind of silly.
Oh yeah, there's some really funny stuff that you can do in there. I think that it's different leveling content, and it's pretty efficient leveling content.
Yeah, we ran 3 floors successfully, and I got roughly 2.5 levels, maybe a little bit more than that. So that seems definitely worth the time.
Yeah. It's roughly equivalent to doing like a random each 10 floors.
So I've heard people are just trying to queue for the first 10 over and over and over. Is that a thing that's happening, like for leveling purposes?
I don't know. The amount of XP you get does go up, but you can clear the first 10 floors real fast. That just sounds painful and mindless to me, though.
This is a game where people took Fates and turned it into a mindless grind for leveling.
I know, because there's not that many things to do to level.
So I can totally see that same mindset optimizing the Deep Dungeon.
Look, is it more interesting than Dark Desires?
Yes, it's a hell of a lot more interesting than that whole mess.
Then I think we still have a net positive.
Yeah. So was there anything else major in this patch?
I don't even know.
As far as Final Fantasy is concerned, not
Yeah.
really. The PvP season ended.
So, no.
This is the point where I tell you I didn't even know it was season-based.
I'm not surprised.
I keep thinking to myself that someday I'm going to try PvP, and then it never happens because usually the queue is really long.
Because no one does it?
Yeah, because no one does it.
That's actually hasn't been true, because the smaller mode, the 4v4, the Feast, has actually been somewhat popular.
Okay, cool. It seemed like it would be a cool thing. Because don't you end up having basically a whole other set of skills that are PvP focused?
I think they just embrace different abilities for PvE and PvP.
Yes, there's an entire set of PvP skills, in addition to all the PvE skills. So I have no idea how in the world you fit all this stuff on your bar, but whatever. It's also the only application for one punch in the game.
What does that one even do?
It's a monk skill that removes buffs from your target.
Wow. That sounds like a thing that
It has extremely limited application in PvE, and is used somewhat often in PvP.
Extremely limited application sounds about right.
Every so often when I remember it exists, they used to like remove berserk buffs from monsters.
So I'm going to have to admit that I'm still a little fuzzy on how even though I've done it, on how the deep dungeon functions.
So you basically create a save, and that save it's basically marking like one type of progress through it, and you can do that with a class or job.
Or a party.
Yeah. And you can set this up, you can basically either set this up to have like your party, which is what the fixed party is. It means that you've got a static party for that run. Or a solo run, because you might be crazy. Or a, what's the term I'm looking for?
Match party.
Match party. And match parties basically are, get randomed in. And so if you want to join the dungeon with somebody, they've got to be on the same set of floors as your save, or you have to start a new save. It's actually, at least to me, really reminiscent of the 4-job Fiesta.
Except for each player is only playing one role, but the mix of roles that you have is different.
Yeah. I mean, you've got some number of abilities, or some number of classes, and sometimes you random in and it's all black mages.
So the other night we were running with a relatively balanced party of Machinist, Black Mage, Dark Knight, and then me on my horrible excuse of a Scholar. And it mostly seemed to work.
Yeah, you can make a lot of things work. I mean, I did the final bits with what was it? What was it I had? Three Black Mages and a Monk.
And that probably went crazy fast. It felt like the only time that we struggled was when we split up and the DK and I just couldn't kill stuff fast enough.
That can definitely be a problem.
And it was really like the third set of floors when we started to have issue with killing stuff fast enough.
Yeah, by the third or fourth set, you really want to be moving together, even if that just means blowing everything up as one group.
So there's 50 levels to the dungeon, right? Currently?
Yeah.
And you're upgrading phantom gear that that caps at 30? Okay. And when you get to 30, you can turn it in for a weapon and a piece of armor. Is that correct?
Yep.
Just a weapon.
No, just a weapon.
Oh, okay. But
your weapon and armor have to both be 30. Basically, as you traverse it, you're looking for these silver chests. And when you find a silver chest, it has a chance of raising your armor level.
They commented on the Japanese forum that they're increasing that chance, by the way.
Oh?
Yes.
Because it mostly seems to be based on floor.
Basically, they think that you can't get quite high enough on the lower floors.
I'm okay with this. So for me, one full level 50 run got me to plus 12, plus 16, something like that. And at that point, I could not actually get higher in most of the lower floors.
So it sounds like maybe that was just a bad luck kind of thing, and they intended people to get high in the lower floors, or?
It's hard to say. It definitely reached a point where very quickly where I couldn't get upgrades unless I was in floor 30 or higher.
Mm.
But I'm also not sure what the rate is supposed to be. I don't know how fast I'm supposed to expect to be getting upgrades.
I think I only ended up exiting the night around 13, 14, 15, something like that. And that was for, I guess, the failed run, I got no credit from that, right?
Yeah. Yeah, if you fail a run, you get nothing.
That's the big complaint I'm hearing on the forums, is that, you're entirely at the mercy of a pug when it comes to success or fail. And they don't like the fact that, you have to traverse 10 floors before you get to keep any of your progress.
I mean, it lends a sense...
I feel like it doesn't take that long to traverse 10 floors.
It really doesn't.
I don't know. There's a thread of horror stories of people that have been matched up with folks that have just, wiped them, and...
I mean, yes, that's a thing that can happen.
Yeah, you can wipe, but...
It is... The floors are constructed a bit like some classic roguelikes, so you can stumble into some bad luck.
Yeah, I've gotten bad luck.
Well, we got that one trap that spawned a bajillion things. That's what ended up wiping us. And then line of sight.
Yeah, traps are mean, mimics are mean. Sometimes the floor layout itself is less than nice.
The mimics that cast pox.
So mimics.
Mimics, yeah. I mean, that was horrible. Pox
Mimics
was horrible. But all in all, like, I think it's really cool.
Yeah, I think it's really, really neat. For me, it's super fun.
Well, and it kind of throws a monkey wrench in all of your plans, and you have to, I don't know, it seemed like it was super useful when we were scouting stuff out.
Yeah, there's a lot of, like, non-standard strategy that you can adopt, and I think that's really cool. It's really neat to, like, actively work at doing something different. Because, like, and you see it, it's actually really interesting. I've noticed various things as I've been playing it. Like, tanks are really complacent, on by and large. So, like, tanks really just sort of, they have this tendency to just pull and assume that they'll get heals. And so if you end up in a group that doesn't have a healer, you see tanks that just don't know what to do.
Well, and honestly, the thing lulls you into a false sense of security with the first couple floors. Because in those first few, or like the first 10 floors, you can just straight up do stupid stuff and, like, it doesn't matter. I was pulling like mad in those first floors.
Yeah.
And it was no big deal. Like, it was lol, DPS. But as far as the later stuff, yeah, I had to be super cautious.
I mean, it will kill you if you're not careful. I mean, even the traps.
The explosive traps are what, something like 80% of your max HP?
Yeah.
Well, and there were so many moments where, like Tam or Thalen had split off to go scout out, and they'd get into trouble, and I'd have to run through the dungeon trying to find them and cast, like, eye for an eye as I'm running towards them to maybe, possibly save them. And, like, there were a couple cases where I absolutely did, and there were a couple cases where, nope, it didn't matter.
Yeah, that's what I find really interesting about it, is, like, you'd think, oh, well, just stick together. Like, keep your group together. That's Dungeoning 101.
But that's not entirely a good idea.
Yeah, like, you don't have the time to do that.
I feel like if you're in a more offensive group, you do, but...
Yeah, it's true.
Well, it's probably better if you're in, like, a super offensive group to stick together, because faster things die, less damage you take.
Right.
Yep. But you definitely, like, don't need a tank. You don't need a healer. You can get by without DPS, although that's a lot harder.
That's another one that sounds like it would be interesting. Like, just bring 4 scholars. See how it goes.
Oh, that would be miserable. I'm sorry.
That would be the first 4 levels.
It would be miserable for the start.
Well, and we could have done a lot more to communicate better. Because, like, had we actually tried to set up pulls and things like that, I could have potentially, like, thrown down Shadow Flare, but we were constantly moving stuff out of the Shadow Flares whenever I did try and make that work. I definitely want to go back in again soon, mostly because, I want more Scholar levels. This is like a fun way to level a Scholar instead of the dungeon grind, because what happens in the dungeon grind is you end up getting Brave Locks over and over and over.
Yeah, at least it's different.
Yeah. Well, and it's different every single time. And that's huge, the fact that it's constantly shifting a little bit.
Yeah, the little differences. And the sense of long-term progress other than just leveling a new character makes a big difference as well.
Yeah.
Because, like, as I'm playing it, no matter what character I'm leveling, I'm also working on an eye level 235 weapon.
Which is kind of amazing. Like, that has to be the easiest way to get a 235 weapon.
Oh, yeah.
Right now, yes, by a lot.
And that's the thing about weapons in this game, is they feel like a huge upgrade regardless of when you get them.
Yeah. Feel meaningful.
So, the other really big game that patched this week was World of Warcraft. And they rolled out the pre-expansion patch that introduced all of the class changes. And I have to say, like, this is probably the most sweeping change I've seen in WoW history. Like a lot of things changed. And it's not just subtle tweaks here and there. It's night and day differences on what they decided a class is going to be from this point on. And more so, it's what specs they have decided are going to be from this point on. And it has led to a lot of super salty players, especially if the class fantasy that they were used to is not what the class fantasy is going forward. Namely, I'm thinking survival hunters are super angry.
I mean, we didn't know that was coming, but I don't disagree.
Yeah. Like, on the other hand, survival hunter is the thing that I've tried to play since the beginning of WoW. Like, I tried to make a melee hunter work back in the day. I was most often excited about getting another melee weapon to see if I could finally make it work. And I could do minor things with it, but it really was me fighting against something that wasn't ever supposed to happen, and now it totally happens, and it's great. And it basically plays like the Beastmaster from Rift should have played, where you're, running around with a two-hander and doing attacks on it, and also you have a pet that's being useful. But there's like a lot of weird changes, like combat rogues are no longer a thing.
Wait, what?
Combat rogues aren't a thing. They're now outlaw. But
Which is what?
So it's okay. This is the weird thing about Outlaws. It's not really the combat rogue spec. It's basically Gangplank from League of Legends. It is a
gun.
Yep. It is basically a saber and pistol spec. I mean, you're not equipping a gun. You're still equipping two weapons, but your attacks are basically slashes and gunshots. Either up close gunshots or ranged finisher gunshots. And
Interesting.
so there's basically like a combo point builder that is a saber slash, and a combo point builder that is a gunshot. And then there is a finisher that is a saber slash, and a finisher that is a gunshot. And you have this other weird ability called roll the dice, or actually roll the bones. But it's like you roll dice, and you get some random effect based on that. So really, I just
lost all interest.
Really, you're not ever going to use that ability. You're going to use your other two finishers.
There was actually, that reminds me of, there's an FF11 class called Corsair that sounds very, very, very similar to that.
Well, honestly, what it reminds me of is the Witch Hunter from Warhammer Online.
That's not a... I don't know if you played a Witch Hunter, but that's not a very resounding...
I liked the Witch Hunter. Like, it was probably my second favorite class to play.
Did you play it before or after it was good?
I don't know. I played it early in the game.
Because, man, it was garbage early in the game.
That's really not what I remember hearing about it.
No, I remember it being really powerful.
It was, well...
Like, I could 1v1 or 1v2 most players in PvP as a Witch Hunter.
That's why, yes, it was... I remember. That's what I remember hearing about it.
Yeah.
So I played it. I remember playing it right at launch, and my experience was, oh, you are a witch elf, but worse in every way.
You're thinking of something different. You're thinking of...
Dude with a hat and a sword and a gun.
Okay, no, you're thinking of the same class.
Tried to light people on fire from behind.
Yeah.
Yeah. Witch elves were basically just better in every way. I mean, I hear they fixed them fairly quickly, but...
I don't know. I just remember doing a lot of PvP as a witch hunter and wrecking people. So for me, it had a good connotation. And that's what this reminds me of. It's just like... And you also have like a potion that you can use that's a heal. But like thematically, it's all about... You're basically a pirate. That's what it feels like. You're a pirate.
Interesting.
And then other things that they've done is they've basically taken away utility. So that every class has... This is what this spec is. Like, it's this, and it's only this. They took away buffs across the board. There are no buffs. So there's like no maintenance-y type abilities that people have to keep up to make the raid function.
Interesting. That's probably a good thing.
On one hand, that reduces the whole is more than some of its parts, but on the other hand, in practice, that was awful.
Yeah. Well, because getting the right combination of buffs was always a pain in the ass.
Yes.
I mean, they did have composition builders that would tell you needed this, this, and this, or if you were missing this buff, this was the person that you really needed to recruit. So the fact that it went away is probably a good thing. For classes that did lots of things, like Warrior, for example, no longer has stances. Prot is just permanently the tanky stance. There's no stance swapping. They gained a lot of damage in that the defensive buffs no longer, or the defensive stance that they're permanently in no longer has a negative effect. So it like doesn't nerf their damage output. Death Knights, there are no stances you swap through, or presences in their case. Frost is officially the dual wield class. They cannot use a two-hander. They're just a dual wield class. So they've made like a lot of finite restrictions that are like, this is what this class does. You get this weapon, you get this. So like Marksman and Hunter, they have, you know, some really cool abilities, but they don't ever get a pet. Like they can't have a pet. They are just a ranged attacker.
Interesting. So they kind of went with more the Final Fantasy approach.
Yeah, they've really drilled down what each individual class and what each individual spec is, and that's it. And they've also made it to where you can pretty much change specs at will. So you can be you can basically have, you know, talents for each of your specs and swap back and forth between them. The only weird thing about that is that now you can only change talents in like an inn or a resting area. But in theory, you can have all three, or if you're a druid, 4 specs talented out and swap back and forth between them at will. And the only thing that kind of makes me leery there is that it sounds like they're setting it up to where everyone is going to need to know all 3 specs.
That's a weird choice.
Yeah, well, it kind of worries me. Like, so for example, I am only interested in Melee Hunter. That's all I'm ever going to be. Now that I have it, I don't want to play anything else. Well, maybe Beastmaster, but that's it. Like, I will never do Marksman.
That was kind of my thought. Like, if I were to do that again, I wouldn't be playing Marksman or any other version of that class without a pet.
Right, exactly. Like, it's a pet class. Like, so I'm either going to be the ranged pet class, or I'm going to be the melee pet class. I will never play Marksman. But my fear is that there's going to be a lot of peer pressure to swap to Marksman for specific situations. By making the specs so narrow focused on you do this one thing.
So it might be like, oh hey, this boss sucks for ranged, so get your Corsair or whatever.
Yeah. Which I guess is fine, but I could see a lot of people having problems with that, you know.
It's annoying.
I mean, just think back to the mages in Late Night Raiders. They each had a religious affiliation with a spec. Like, there were frost mages, there were fire mages, there were arcane mages, and by God, you better not ask them to switch.
Except they all went frost anyway.
Yeah, well, not Ceci. Ceci was always a fire mage. I don't know how he made it work, but...
By not going to Blackwing Lair?
Or Ragnaros. Blackwing Lair was less awful, but still pretty bad.
But yeah, so like that has some weird social ramifications to it, I think.
Yeah.
What it seems like is this is going to be an expansion where people switch classes or switch characters. Because it seems like there are certain classes that people are super happy about, and then there are certain classes that, like, if it's their own class, they really aren't happy with the changes. And for me, everything that I have attempted to play has been pretty good, but I had to start back from square one and completely wipe my bars and rebuild the way the class works, like today. Because most of them don't even share abilities anymore, or at least not in a significant way between the different specs.
Huh.
Now, kind of the positive there is they each have like really unique animations, so they feel really different.
Like, that's cool.
Like the swashbuckly rogue thing, the outlaw, it feels like you're a swashbuckly rogue because the way that the sword swings look, it's
big, wide.
Yeah, big,
swings.
wide, flourishy type swings.
Yeah, I mean, that's interesting. They must be learning from Korean MMOs.
I think so. I mean, like they've definitely changed their mission in design, and it's, whether or not it's going to work, it has yet to be seen. But it's definitely them doing something different, and it's interesting. I don't know if it's a good kind of different yet, but
see,
it's always a little scary.
What's really interesting to me is that as a former WoW player, I haven't gotten any of this kind of information. Like, somebody on the marketing side is totally dropping the ball.
Well, and honestly, like, it feels like some of these things are just kind of buried in patch notes, and if you aren't keeping up track on what's going on patch-wise, it's... I mean, I've had to dig for the information that I've found about the various class changes. I mean, they have a front screen now that basically says, these are your core abilities for this spec. And that's a pretty good starter, but it's not everything. So they're only talking about 4 or 5 abilities on those screens. Whereas there's usually a lot more to a class than just that. And there's a lot more about the way the class should feel than just that.
Yeah. Well, and like, I mean, I feel like there's a, hey, we saw that you used to play a rogue and a death knight. Have you seen the changes we've made? You might have fun with them. Check out our all new animations for these classes. Check out this and that.
So I know I get those from, oddly enough, F11 all the time.
Yeah.
But has WoW ever really done anything like that?
No,
like,
and
they've done you should come back and play, but they don't really... I feel like they're not doing a good job of saying why. Like,
yeah. And that's exactly my point, is like, you know, if I'd gotten an email that was, hey, you know, I don't necessarily love, like, come back and play our MMO marketing emails, but, like, I get an email on the regular from Tor saying, oh, hey, we added this new thing. Maybe you find that interesting. And maybe I do and maybe I don't, but it's something at least.
Yeah, I mean, and it seems like this expansion is going to be this sweeping redo of all of the classes. I mean, and for the most part, like, some of them still play a lot the same.
Can't imagine Beast Mastery is that different than how it used to be.
Yeah, Beast Mastery looks much the same. Prot Warrior is pretty similar. Prot Warrior lost, like, Heroic Strike. But instead, they gave a mitigation ability that kind of fills that slot in the rotation. So, for a tanky tree, that makes total sense. And as far as damage output, it feels like I'm doing about the same as I did, at minimum with Heroic Strike in a rotation, but maybe probably a little closer to Gladiator since we lost that.
Damage debuff.
Yeah, there's no damage debuff now, so we're actually doing normal damage.
That means you aren't doing, like, damage with 2 weapons or 2-hander, though, so it'll be less than...
Right, so it'll be less than Fury, it'll be less than Arms.
Also probably lacking a whole bunch of their abilities that cause them to get damage boosts and so on and so forth. So, yeah. Probably a lot less, but even so, it's not nothing.
Right. I mean, it's a step in the right direction for making Prot something you can actually run around in all the time if you wanted to. Not that I ever didn't do that already, but I'm one of the weird people that likes leveling his tanks, so... Death Knight, I thought, was in a really bad position until I did some research tonight, and I was actually doing some stuff wrong, and after swapping what I was doing, they're back to the godlike survival that I was used to. But I think that's going to be one of the problems, is like, Death Knight was one of those classes that I felt I knew well enough to just kind of wing it without any research, and because of that, I chose poorly. And my fear is that a lot of longtime mages, longtime hunters, longtime warlocks are going to step into this expansion trying to wing it without really good advisement as to, these are the changes to your class identity is now different, you probably shouldn't play the way you were playing before.
Yeah. Which is another, like, marketing fail. Because, like, that's a point at which you're just like, oh, well, I don't know how to play my own class anymore. I guess I'm out. If you haven't been keeping up.
Right. I mean, I did not like the changes to Death Knight and Warlords, and as a result, I played something different. But if you're one of those players that has focused on a single class, and you don't really have alternate classes that you feel like swapping to, or you decide you don't care about playing the game enough to swap to one of these alternate classes, this may be a make or break moment for some people.
Yeah, and by not care, I mean, do you want to level a class all the way up and work on your factions and work on, like, no.
Because there's still a lot of that bullshit that is non-account based.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that cemented I don't go back to WoW is I like to play lots of different classes. And WoW doesn't give me a good way of doing that.
Yeah, and there's some changes to the
Final
way.
Fantasy games are one of the very few games that do.
It's
Well-
one of the reasons I've stuck with them.
And that's honestly one of the problems with this expansion as well, is they've made a lot of changes to crafting to where if you are going to want to do crafting, you are going to have to be playing all of these characters because all of these rare resources are only found by playing the character that you're sitting on. So you can't use one. It is much harder to use a single character to kind of power level your army of alts. And that, I think, is going to be problematic as well.
That was the thing they sort of started in. I guess they really started with BC, with Primal Nethers.
Yeah, but at least I think Primal Nethers could be transferred, couldn't they? Or were they buying on pickup?
Primal Nethers could be traded. Whatever
The icy things from Wrath couldn't be traded, I don't think. But yeah, they're basically going to have a currency like that. So, like Savage Blood was for Warlords, it could be traded. This, whatever it's called, and I forget, it's not going to be traded, and it's gained based on your activity in the game, something along those lines.
Pandaria couldn't be traded either. Like, you seem to keep going back and forth on that one.
I mean, they would really like us to play a lot of alts, but it feels like they're not doing a lot to help us play a lot of alts.
Yeah, it's sort of like play a bunch of alts because and it feels like hearing you and Grace talk about playing your alts sounds really chorey to me. Like I gotta log in and then I gotta do the same thing again on this other character, and I've got to do that X number more times before I'm done for today.
With the garrisons, it was absolutely a chore. I don't know what class halls are going to be like, which are basically the new garrison. I mean, I've played a little bit of it in beta, and so far they're pretty chill, and you seem to be able to do stuff while out playing the game, rather than constantly, cloistering yourself back in a fake instanced area of the game.
Well, for me, it's not even a question of being cloistered away from the rest of the game, although it certainly doesn't help. It's more, what are you doing? Like, whatever it is I just did, I've got to do 10 more times.
Yeah. And honestly, I'm not sure what that's going to look like. Supposedly, a lot of that stuff are in the form of world events this time instead of daily quests, so I don't know if those will be fun or if they'll... I mean, because Beast Tribe dailies are, the pinnacle of dailies. They're the standard, go do these things type quests in Final Fantasy XIV. So, those don't necessarily bother me, but...
I don't necessarily like Beast Tribe dailies, and note I haven't really done any of them. But I also don't have to do the same 4 dailies on every single class. Like, there's an upper limit to how many I can do per day, and it's on my single character. Whereas, I remember hearing people talk about doing their dailies, which involved doing a dungeon and like 10 or 12 quests on every single character they had, which just sounded like a grind.
Honestly, the worst thing for me ever when playing quote-unquote casually in World of Warcraft has been the LFR grind. Because if I have a stable of a bunch of, capped characters, I feel like, oh hey, I should probably do LFR on all of them. Because I can get loot from LFR on all of them.
Yeah.
And that's the one thing that's like really broken me a couple of times. I just don't care because LFR is generally a horrible experience because, random people raiding is not necessarily a great idea. But it feels like a lost opportunity cost when you don't do it.
Yeah.
Or at least it feels like I really should be doing this thing because, it helps me move this character forward in progression, in gear, and whatever. But at this point, I really don't know what Legion is going to bring. All I know is that it is significantly different already than what people are used to. And much like Gladiator was a player fantasy of mine, being able to DPS with a sword and shield, and legitimately DPS with a sword and shield, Melee Hunter is another player fantasy of mine, so I'm probably going to enjoy the hell out of it while it lasts, because I sincerely doubt it's going to make it more than one expansion, just like Gladiator didn't.
Gladiator Look, when they announced Gladiator, I knew it wasn't going to make it more than one expansion. This might make it more than one.
I assumed it wasn't going to make it more than one, just for the simple fact that it was too hard to balance.
There's also explicitly doing a thing that they broke the Druid specs in 2 to stop.
Yeah. High survival DPS is not usually a thing that works well for PvP.
Yep.
It's going to be interesting to see what comes of this, because they're definitely doing a lot of weird shit. And the gnashing of teeth and drama surrounding this has been pretty epic so far.
Does anybody unironically use the term slap in the face?
I probably. I've tried to limit my consumption of it.
That's fair. And probably healthy.
Yeah, I'm sure it's weird that, I follow a lot of WoW players that this is their primary game, but I guess over the years I've pruned them just to the right level to where I will see the echoes of something going on, but I won't actually see the actual thing. So it's like being aware of things without having to deal with the horribleness that is sometimes there. So another big event that happened this week was the launch of Starbound, like the official and for real launch of Starbound.
Which, much like Minecraft, is kind of a weird state, since people are like, wait, didn't they already have that?
Honestly, this is a broader topic that when a pay-to-play or pay-to-beta game finally launches, it's really confusing because I think to most of the people that bought it off Steam, they assumed it was already launched, even though it said early access on it, because early access is largely meaningless.
There's a website now called Steam Spy, which tracks sales numbers of Steam games at enough accuracy that some devs have commented on it. And they basically said that early access does not mean you get 2 launches. You get 1 launch, and it is your early access launch. Your other launch barely makes an impact.
Well, because quite frankly, if you cared about the game in any significant way, chances are you bought in early and have been playing for a while. So that when it launches, sure, you can make all the fanfare you want in the world, but it's utterly meaningless. Prime example is Landmark. Landmark officially launched a while ago, but it didn't really change anything. Like, it's the same game. It's been there for months.
I actually didn't know that.
Yeah, Landmark officially launched.
Well, and that's the weird thing about Starbound, is it's not. Like, Starbound is not the same game it was when I played it a few months back.
To be completely fair, Starbound is not the same game it was last week.
Yeah.
But, I don't know, it's kind of weird to think about.
They're very much the exception rather than the rule when it comes to early access.
Absolutely. Well, even then, their early access was mostly what early access should be. It was playable, got your chance to see the game, but it wasn't finished.
Yeah. And by not finished, like, they patched in a plot.
Yes.
Wait, there's a plot now?
There's an actual plot in Starbound, yes.
There's an actual plot with, like, cutscenes and stuff.
That's kind of awesome.
Yeah. And it's got some rough edges. Like, I was doing a quest when I was playing yesterday with Ash, and what happened to me was I logged in and it put me down on a planet, but I couldn't go back to the place where I was without collecting a whole bunch of resources and essentially starting the whole, like, starting quest again. So I can't, like, progress in this quest I was doing for...
Well, that's a different thing. Because I found when I connected to the server, it put me on a new starting world that did not have the portal activated.
Ah, yes. Okay, maybe it is that.
So while I kept my quest progress, I couldn't go anywhere until I managed to activate the portal.
Yeah.
Again. Getting core fragments. Again.
Yeah, okay. So that's what I'm doing. Like, that's what I'm doing and what I've been dying at for the last, more time than I care to admit.
Okay, so one of the questions that I had is that technically we have a server.
Yeah.
Is it going to stick all of us on the same world?
No, you'll have a random starting world. Which
okay.
Mostly means you're playing single player until you can get out of your starting system.
Though
that's not really true, because you can join a party and teleport directly to other people.
Yeah.
But can you ever get back to your starting world if you did that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Starbound interests me so much more than, like, Terraria did.
Agreed.
Because it's just a much larger world full of more interesting things. Like, Terraria had a fixed path of things that you could find. Like, there were only so many types of discoveries you could have.
Well, that's going to be true here, too. We just haven't found them yet.
Yeah, but, like, once you've exploited a single planet, you can go to other planets, and they'll be slightly different. I guess what I mean with Terraria is that your one game was limited to your one world. And in this case, once you get, once you reach whatever goals you have on the one planet, you can go off and explore other planets without starting a new game.
Trade-off for that is that I don't know how big Terraria's worlds were, but I'm pretty sure they're larger than most planets are in Starbound.
It's definitely true. But I also like that Starbound, like, the sense of moving around in Starbound is really satisfying.
I will probably start a Monkey Man again, because Planet of the Apes.
I started a robot instead of the usual avian that I had been doing.
I'm a Nova Kid. It's super sweet.
I am zero shocked you chose Nova Kid.
Well, it was either that or human. But my spaceship is a train. Like, what more could you want?
My spaceship is a castle.
I don't even remember what my spaceship was.
Apex actually have, like, the most technologically advanced spaceship.
Because you're like a space dictatorship.
But I can totally be the one nice guy. But monkey. I like monkeys. I can be Dr. Zaius. So, anything else interesting happened this week that we haven't talked about already?
I can't think. What else?
I mean, I know I spent a lot of time doing the Pokemon thing. It's still a huge subplot in my life.
I've been enjoying the new Overwatch character.
A healing sniper.
Yes. Healing Sniper. So the problem that she's got, she's really cool. Like, Healing Sniper, you heal allies by shooting them, you hurt enemies by shooting them. Classified as a support, the biggest problem is she's not a full support, and that can be a problem. Like, if your group decides, oh, we have an Ana, we don't need somebody to play Mercy or Lucio, like, no, you're incorrect. It also means that your damage isn't crazy good. It's, like, decent, but not amazing. But she's really fun to play. It's really funny sleep darting people. Like, somebody ults, and you sleep dart them, and it interrupts their ult, and they're really salty about it. But yeah, she's fun. She fits really well into their sort of continuing, character narrative.
Well, I think more than anything as well, like, she represents an archetype that just doesn't exist in video games.
Yeah, I mean, the last time I played a support sniper was Borderlands 2. And it was super fun.
I would say that's a different sort of support, but I guess it really wasn't, was it?
The what?
So I would say that's a different sort of support, but I guess it really wasn't, was it?
It really wasn't.
Well, and also, there's an interesting thing going on there because she represents this grizzled war veteran, a role you never see played by a female character in a video game.
Oh, she's awesome. Like,
yeah, like, I mean, but you'll see, like, the grizzled old war veteran that's a guy. You'll never encounter that as a female character. And it's this great swap up there, and it totally works.
It works, and I love her personality because it's the same personality as you'd expect. Like, some of her best lines are her chatting with Soldier 76.
Yep.
Because they're both like the old people. And Reinhardt is the other one, where they're like the old people reminiscing about the old times.
Well, who all are actually the members of the original Overwatch group? It's those three and Reaper. And maybe Winston and Tracer?
I don't know how Tracer would be, but I don't know, maybe Mercy and May are part of the originals.
Trying to think, there's like a shot of the original group, and I don't remember who all's in it. I know 76, Reaper, Ana, but we didn't know who she was. We just knew it was Farrah's mom.
Yeah.
And then Mercy, yeah. And Reinhardt. Oh, Torbjorn. I think he was in, like, the original group.
Yeah, I think so.
Overwatch is a weird game for me, because I thought I would be playing a lot more of it than I actually have.
The fun of Overwatch is 100% in playing with friends. Like if you've got I've been running with like ammo in them, and that's been super, super fun. Like playing that game by myself is kind of miserable. But it's also the most accessible competitive video game I've ever played.
Well, and honestly, like it plays miraculously good on every system I've tried to play it on. Like you can tell they've really optimized it, because like on my laptop, it doesn't really perform any different than on my desktop upstairs with a significantly better video card in it.
Yeah.
But it's weird that that's kind of become a thing. The competitive games are designed to be, that run really well on, relatively crappy hardware.
But
I guess it's the whole expanding the base thing.
Yeah.
Making sure that everyone can play it.
I mean, for a competitive game, you really want to be playing as well as possible.
Right. Well, I know like the AMD APU systems were really designed for League of Legends, Dota, things like that, StarCraft, Team Fortress 2, CSGO, to where you have a budget machine that will run those, not to say rudimentary graphics, but non-super taxing graphics. I mean, that's not to say like a game like Overwatch can't look beautiful, but they're using a lot of careful tricks to get it looking that way.
Yeah. Well, we appreciate... Blizzard has discovered that people appreciate stylized graphics. And oh man, are they never going to do anything else?
Why would they?
Fighting the Uncanny Valley sucks. Why bother?
Yeah. I mean, that was ultimately the problem of EverQuest 2 versus World of Warcraft. Is EverQuest 2 tried to go for much more realistic looking, even though, I mean, if you think in terms of what was available at that time, they were much more realistic looking.
Yeah.
And it just didn't work. Like, you had Play-Doh hair going on and weird noses and...
I mean, Final Fantasy has its own stylized thing going on.
Final Fantasy had to do that because the PS3 exists.
Honestly, though, I think probably the fact that they targeted the PS3 was one of the better things that they could do for their system. It's made the game run really well on minimal hardware, and not everyone can afford a decent gaming machine. And if it runs on, a nice desktop, not necessarily designed for gaming, then you've really increased the total number of people that you can get roped into your game.
Yeah.
Plus, the PS3.
Although I totally expect them to drop the PS3 from...
Now that the PS4 exists, is relatively successful, and they have the decent player base running on it, I do expect them to drop PS3 support sooner rather than later.
Well, with this expansion.
Yeah.
Because, even Destiny, for example, they are dropping 360 and PS3 from Rise of Iron. That's basically the cutoff. You can do up through Taken King, but, there will be no release for the last gen systems.
Huh, interesting. Speaking of Final Fantasy expansion, I'm thinking we hear a release date at FanFest.
I want to hear what it is at FanFest.
Yeah. I think it's going to follow the same pattern that it did last time, to where
we won't hear a release date until Japan's FanFest.
Right, exactly. So we have 3 in a row. We have Las Vegas, we have London, and then Tokyo, and they're roughly a month apart. So we'll hear what it is and the basics in Las Vegas. We'll hear detailed class information in London, and then we'll probably have last details and the launch date in Tokyo. But I expect it to be another relatively quick launch.
Heaven's Ward was what, 9 months between announcement and launch?
We found out about it in October of the year, and it launched in June of the next year. So roughly, although playing it seemed really quick between the two.
Yeah, that's because we stopped playing it for a while. We kind of faded out a bit between 2.5 and launch of Heaven's Ward.
1.5?
0.5, or 2.51 or whatever it was.
That's right. We also had a lot to do because we were raiding then.
Yes.
We didn't stop raiding until Heaven's Ward, did we?
Did not.
Yeah, we still had a lot of content.
Right, we were still trying to clear Coil at that point.
Yeah.
I was more thinking it felt like Heaven's Ward moved quick once it started.
If they keep it relatively the same size, I kind of expect a similar launch schedule.
I just want them to tell me what classes I'm going to be playing.
That's really the
Said
big
new
thing.
classes are hard, so I'm not sure we're going to get 3 of them this time.
It doesn't. I don't necessarily need 3 of them. I only played 1 of the 3 new ones this time around. I just think I would probably get very, very heavily in Final Fantasy more than I sort of am. If I had a class that really like suited my player fantasy, because that game still doesn't have one, at least for me.
Well, and that's the thing, is like player fantasy is super important.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I am feeling super revitalized in WoW this week just because I have a melee hunter, and that's it. Like, that's it. That's the only thing that's really super exciting me, is the ability to play a melee hunter. And, well, to a lesser extent, I really like Pirate Rogue, because that was the kind of rogue that interested me. So if they give you a red mage or some kind of tricksy tank that uses magic, it would totally play into your player fantasy.
Yeah.
And I think maybe companies are starting to get that more than just generic warrior or generic healer or generic whatever, players really want to play something that feels unique. And I'm, I guess, really hoping to get samurai out of this expansion. Especially if it's Doma themed by any chance.
If it's going to Doma, then there is no chance we don't get samurai.
Right.
Yeah. My hope is that, and like, samurai would be fun. Not my favorite thing, but definitely fun. But man, I want red mage or blue mage or like one of the Final Fantasy has so many cool like non-standard mage types.
But see, I think they're going to ration those things. Like, you'll maybe get one of them.
I'm okay with that. I only need one of them. I just want more than 0.
I kind of think it would be cool if we got Sage.
Balancing them, though.
Like, if we got Sage and Matoya was the class master for Sage. And honestly, I don't remember anything about Sage, like, other than it was mostly white mage, but I want to say it did some other stuff, didn't it? Because the only one I can think of right now off the top of my head was Tella.
Which game are you thinking of?
I remember, like, in 4, Tella was a Sage.
Or didn't really have classes as they existed in other games. Tella was just an everything mage.
Yeah, the jack of all trades mage. I do think like Realm, a painter or a dancer would be interesting.
I mean, I know dancer is one of the most often requested classes.
Dancer would be interesting.
Painter was weird.
I'm pretty sure Realm is the only
painter that's existed.
Yeah.
But it also, like, it kind of had a blue magey flair to it, because it was all about collecting attacks and then recreating said attacks. I mean, I also think Beastmaster would be interesting.
Yeah, I mean, you could do an interesting pet class. You could do an interesting... Like, there's so many interesting Final Fantasy classes that aren't warrior, mage, person with a ranged weapon. And I feel like I want more of that.
I think the biggest challenge, though, is how to fit these interesting classes into the canned roles that the game craves without losing the flavor of the class.
See, I don't feel like you need to... I don't feel like that's as big a problem as people seem to worry.
I actually disagree with you there. I think it's a rather big problem.
I mean, they have to function in a dungeon finder.
Sure. But like, if you gave, say, red mage, which is a mix of white and black magic and some melee, so you give them some like mid-range spells, mostly instant cast, that are like...
Is red mage a DPS, a tank, or a healer?
DPS or a tank. You could do DPS or tank, but either one works.
I mean, Ash's question is the problem. It's like, which hole do you fit it in?
I just don't feel like that's that difficult a question to answer. Like,
I do, because I feel like coming to a consensus is hard. Oh, let me rephrase that. Is prone to disagreement. Like we saw with Dark Knight and people continuing to think that it is actually a DPS class.
Well, sure. But like, Dark Knight is also a very successful class, a la, as far as WoW goes. Or as far as Final Fantasy goes. Like, yeah, there's some initial confusion.
It's continuing confusion.
Sure.
But to be truthful, the same thing happens with Marauder and Warrior.
It's true.
Yeah, like, you give somebody a great big weapon and they're going to think their primary role is to hit people with it. You're going to have the same thing with Samurai if it has a single katana, which it probably will.
It probably will. I wonder if they touch up Dark Knight weapons like they touched up Paladin weapons when Ninja came out. Currently, Dark Knight has some katana-like weapons, whereas previously Paladin had some dagger-like weapons, and they all got replaced when Ninja came out.
Interesting. Yeah, I can see them changing that.
Samurai seems to be the class that they have hinted at most strongly.
Yeah, I mean, Samurai seems pretty likely.
Well, didn't they come out and say that basically it was on the list for this expansion, but they ran out of time?
Said it was on the list and Dark Knight got the nod instead. Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like they're probably going to do what they did last time and tease their way through the content to keep us interested for 3 months. Like, as we go through each of the fan fests. And then even after that, they're going to keep revealing little nuggets of information as they go.
Yeah.
Because I remember in the lead up to Heavensward, I was like hanging on every word, wanting to know what it was going to be like. And they rationed it off a little bit at a time. And to some extent, Bungie's been doing a really good job of doing the same thing with Destiny and the Rise of Iron. It's like every week they have a little mini reveal where they show off new stuff. And I'm really expecting that to be the case with 14 as well. Yeah. So is there anything else major this week?
Not really.
Trying to think, like, if there was anything, and I'm drawing a blank.
I don't know anything.
Yeah, I don't have anything either.
Okay. Well, I guess we will wrap things up, and next week, be sure to tune in for the...
Well, are we actually doing that next week?
Yeah,
a lot of people gone.
We do. Okay, well, we can push it off a week if we have a lot of people gone. It was supposed to be the AggroChat Game of the Month club, or whatever show, but we may push that a week. In the meantime, I will still be Pokemonzing and being an addict there. I have yet to find anything terribly interesting this week. I mostly evolved a bunch of stuff. And of note, if you save up a bunch of evolutions, you can totally get 2 levels in a few minutes. Because I went from 16 to 18 in 20 minutes of the 30-minute lucky egg timer. But anyway.
I believe it.
Yeah, it was madness. It honestly took me 20 minutes to evolve the 20 or so evolutions that I had sitting waiting in the wings. Most of them were trash Pokemon evolutions, but still, it added up. Anyway, well, hopefully you would join us next week, and we have no idea what we're going to talk about yet.
Per usual.
But that's no different than any week. So hopefully you had a good night, and we will see you next week. Good night.
Good night.
Good night.